In March 2003, the US-led coalition of the willing invades Iraq. US President George Bush claims he must disarm Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein of weapons of mass destruction and depose a brutal regime supporting global terror. Since the end of the Gulf War in 1991, a de facto military conflict has continued. US and allied jets enforce no-fly zones in northern and southern Iraq and attack Iraqi air defense, which regularly fires at their aircraft. The US military has thousands of troops in the region and a plan in case of war with Iraq, Operational Plan 1003. But O-Plan 1003 is defensive and involves far too many troops. US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld wants low troop deployment levels, reducing them even further in the post-conflict stages. Some military leaders, like Central Command's General Tommy Franks, disagree. The debates result in delays, lots of changes, and little time for post-conflict stabilization planning. A CENTCOM officer complains. Every friggin' request, they wanted to see the numbers. They wanted to know how many reservists. It delayed every move and sucked energy out of CENTCOM staff. It was ridiculous. There's only so much capacity a staff has, and this was bullshit. It sucked the energy out of long-term thinking. Meanwhile, the ongoing conflict in Afghanistan also saps American resources. The final plan only takes shape in early 2003. CENTCOM scraps an invasion of northern Iraq via Turkey when Ankara refuses. Instead, coalition troops will invade from Kuwait, bypass southern cities, and head for Baghdad. Speed, deception, and surprise are vital to dislocate larger Iraqi forces. Special forces will sow confusion, followed by simultaneous air and ground attack. British troops will occupy the Fa Peninsula and besiege Basra, Iraq's second city. 170,000 troops, the majority American, will invade as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, though commanders keep back some support and logistical units to reduce troop numbers. Britain provides the second largest land contingent, while Australia provides air, naval, and special forces units. Poland also deploys 200 commandos. US commanders assume civilians will receive coalition troops as liberators, and that Saddam will use chemical weapons as they close on Baghdad. Meanwhile, Iraq has few defense plans. Saddam believes the US will likely only launch air attacks, as it had previously, or that last-minute cooperation with UN weapons inspectors searching for Iraqi WMDs will prevent an attack. If the US invades, he has faith in Iraqi arms. Not all his commanders agree, like Mohammed Khalil Hamid. Look, we knew as military men things would go badly for us. We knew the Americans would not be stopped on their march to Baghdad. All of them didn't come thousands of miles just to lose some stupid battle in the southern deserts. They were coming, and we knew what that would mean for us after. Saddam positions most Iraqi forces to oppose historical threats from Iran and Kurdish separatists in northern Iraq. Iraq's best troops, the Republican Guard, are spread across Iraq to reduce the risk of an anti-Saddam coup, with only one division near the Kuwaiti border. By early 2003, Iraqi commanders formed some defense plans, including dispersing supplies to avoid air attack, and for the Fedayeen Saddam, an irregular volunteer unit controlled by the Ba'ath Party. The Fedayeen will fight beside the conventional army, hoping to draw the coalition into costly urban battles. Iraq has over 1 million active and reserve military personnel, but CENTCOM identifies only 350,000 troops as combat efficient. Of Iraq's 4,000 Soviet-era tanks, only 2,000 are operational. And despite the recent Iran-Iraq war, there are few talented high-level commanders. I have to tell you, the Iraqi military was nothing. There were a lot of smart officers, even genius military commanders. But they were not in important posts. Those went to the high Ba'athist officials. So the army really had no one capable of even attempting to lead a fight against the most powerful and technologically advanced army in the world. On March 17, 2003, President Bush issues an ultimatum for Saddam and his sons to leave Iraq or face invasion. In reality, special forces units are already infiltrating from the Jordanian border. On March 19th, US aircraft bombed Dora farms outside Baghdad, hoping to kill Saddam Hussein. Saddam is not there, but it's the first of 156 similar missions to kill key Iraqi figures. None succeed. On March 20th, as the world media watches, US cruise missiles and airstrikes hit communications and command targets in Iraq. At the border, coalition troops advance into southern Iraq, and their morale is high. Marines stopped what they were doing and positively roared with delight. The air was electric. You could feel the excitement all around. There was shouting everywhere. The ground invasion, officially Operation Cobra II, has been brought forward by a day due to intelligence that Iraq plans to sabotage the Rumaila oil fields. This means only the US 3rd Infantry Division, really a heavy armored unit, and the 1st Marine Division are totally prepared for operations. Nonetheless, the US 5th Corps crosses into the Euphrates Valley, aiming for Talil Airfield and Objective Rams near Najaf. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, including the British 1st Armoured Division, secure the Rumaila oil fields, which the Iraqis did not prep for sabotage, and the Fa Peninsula. In a combined US and Royal Marines operation, coalition forces advance into Iraq's only port of Qasr, supported by Australian ships and Polish commandos. In northern Iraq, special forces cooperate with Kurdish Peshmerga militias, while in the west, they conduct raids to give the impression a second force is coming from Jordan. Iraqi resistance is light, partly because coalition troops avoid urban areas. As a result, Baghdad reports that Iraqi forces are repelling coalition troops entering towns. In reality, coalition troops advance rapidly, and logistical issues are more of a hindrance than Iraqi opposition. However, some coalition troops in the Euphrates Valley do report resistance from irregular, non-uniformed fighters, often using swarm tactics.
It's certainly more ferocious than the first Gulf War, but for GW2 it appears that that they may have some desire to fight, but very quickly they realize what a powerful war machine we have, and they surrender almost right away.
Marines Bing West and Ray Smith report. The Iraqis weren't lacking in courage or individual armament, but they were lacking in teamwork, leadership, tactics, and marksmanship. Their occasional successes depended on the law of averages. One such Iraqi success comes on March 23rd. 18 trucks and Humvees from the 507th Maintenance Company accidentally enter the Iraqi-held town of Nasiriyah. After realizing the mistake, they come under ambush. Iraqi fighters kill 11 of the 33 US troops in the poorly protected convoy and capture 7 more. Shortly afterwards, 3 companies of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Brigade, now called Task Force Tarawa, arrive on Nasiriyah's outskirts to find survivors and secure the bridges across the Euphrates and Saddam Canal. But tanks supporting Company B unexpectedly leave for refueling, leaving the Marines to advance under heavy fire. While attempting to flank Iraqi positions, Company B becomes bogged down in swampy ground. Meanwhile, Company C heads towards the Saddam Canal. They assume Company B passed through the town and enter Nasiriyah themselves, where Iraqi troops and Fedayeen ambush them. Company C reaches the canal, but comes under mortar barrage and swarm-style attacks. In the confusion, half of Company C's vehicles withdraw without orders, but only one reaches US lines. Company C's commander recalls the chaos. So I'm thinking, holy shit, there goes half my fighting power over the bridge. I was angry. I mean, incredibly angry. But there was nothing I could do. I tried to get those guys on the net. Nobody's talking on the net. Nobody's listening. And they're gone. The only thing you could do was focus on the guys you have at hand. You could try to keep everybody focused on what's going on. US commanders send air support, but the A-10 Warthogs are not equipped to spot Company C's thermal identification panels and attack Company C. Only after 2 Abrams tanks storm down so-called Ambush Alley is Company C saved. But 18 Marines are killed, potentially 10 by friendly fire. The Battle of Nasiriyah is a shock for the US. Many US commanders genuinely expected Iraqi forces to defect en masse. The CIA tries to contact Iraqi commanders by cell phone and email to get them to defect, but this has little impact. There's more bad news for the US on March 23rd, 24th. Apache helicopter gunships, acting as flying tanks, launch a deep raid against Iraqi positions around the Karbala Gap. US officers have high hopes for the tactic, but Iraqi fire damages 31 of 32 helicopters, with one shot down. The Apaches cause little damage. Although the coalition advance in the opening days is hugely successful in general, the setbacks at Nasiriyah and Karbala have strategic implications. Casualties combined with a sandstorm that hits on March 24th create concern that the invasion is bogging down. Meanwhile, Iraqi propaganda portrays its small successes as big victories, something the US worried about before the invasion even began.
We are surrounding them, we are fighting them, they are started retreating, and we have inflicted in them heavy casualties.
From 2002, the Pentagon develops a comprehensive media management strategy. They understand public support is essential in so-called wars of choice, and many US officers still believe the media lost the country the Vietnam War. One of the most controversial policies is embedding journalists in military units. Although common in previous conflicts, it became rarer as technology developed and the media-military relations soured. In 2003, the Pentagon claims embedding protects journalists from Islamist terrorists and Iraqi agents, a concern heightened by the 2002 murder of journalist Daniel Pearl in Pakistan. Some journalists argue the embedding really aims to control them and integrate them into military culture. By sharing security, embedded journalists may be more likely to identify with their military hosts, resulting in biased reporting. For example, British troops protect journalist Ben Brown from an Iraqi who was about to shoot him with a rocket-propelled grenade. I shook hands with the gunner who had saved me. I almost wanted to give him a high five and embrace him, as though he scored a goal. It was a natural reaction, I suppose, but later I was rather disgusted with my delight. Reporters are supposed to be observers of the battlefield, not participants. I wondered if, by being so close to the British troops, I had somehow crossed an invisible line. Others argue this motive is unproven or a secondary focus, and that the military's real intention is to dominate news media with exciting but superficial footage that would appeal to content-hungry 24/7 news channels. After March 20th, media storylines shift from US claims of Iraqi WMDs or terrorism links to firefights, military technology, or human interest stories. One of these is the dramatic rescue of Jessica Lynch, one of the captured 507th Maintenance Company soldiers. Critics claim media commentators, even those who previously questioned the war plans or justifications, now present war as entertainment. Other journalists claim CENTCOM deliberately gives little information at its briefings in Qatar to encourage networks to use embedded reports. General Frank's director of communications admits this is partly true. Qatar was never designed to be the font of all news. The font of all news was designed to be the front line and their embeds, and it worked out. We couldn't be happier. This domestic information campaign runs parallel to psychological operations aimed at Iraqis. US aircraft dropped 32 million leaflets calling on Iraqi troops to give up. Few surrender to coalition troops, but many simply go home. As one Iraqi commander notes, US firepower reinforces the psychological campaign. The air attacks were the most effective message. The soldiers who did see the leaflets and then saw the air attacks knew the leaflets were true. I started the war with 13,000 soldiers. By the time we were in position in Baghdad, I had less than 1,000. One Iraqi soldier explains the dilemma many soldiers in Saddam's Iraq face. I felt no urge to fight. Saddam Hussein never personally harmed me or my family, but I knew how he hurt so many other Iraqis. And it was hard as a young person to see a future in the country. What's the point of fighting for that? And even if we did fight, even if we won and drive out the Americans, none of us who did the fighting would ever see any benefit from it. Anything good in the country just went to Saddam. The sandstorm and Iraqi resistance forced General Franks into an operational pause until March 29th to regroup. 1st Marine Division Commander Major General Jim Mattis opposes this, but others argue resistance in the Euphrates Valley is tougher than anticipated. The 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions abandoned plans for attacking Baghdad to secure communications and contain Iraqi forces in Samawa and Najaf. Still, Baghdad remains the focus, and coalition commanders plan an advance from the west via the Karbala Gap. Meanwhile, although some Iraqi commanders correctly identify this threat, defense planning remains dysfunctional. Many Ba'ath officials seem to believe exaggerated positive reports like this one. The latest attack by the Fedayeen and the heroic men of the party on the remnants of the enemy on the Az-Zubayr bridge fired up 2 tanks with their crews, and the enemy was routed to the rear. The routed force of the enemy is estimated to be more than 50 tanks. Saddam still believes the real attack will come from the Jordanian border. 2nd Republican Guard Corps Commander Lieutenant General Rohde al-Hamdani is outraged when commanders stripped troops designated for Karbala from his unit. It was the kind of arguments that I imagine took place in Hitler's bunker in Berlin. Were these men all on drugs? By now, Saddam's son Qusay handles most operational decisions, often via word of mouth, to prevent coalition forces identifying locations by radio traffic. He leaves Karbala's defense to the remnants of Hamdani's Medina and Nebuchadnezzar divisions. In early April, the US 5th Corps continues its drive through Karbala, launching feints in multiple directions to confuse Iraqi forces. The last major obstacle facing the US 3rd Infantry Division is the bridge at Musaib, Objective Peach. On April 2nd, under a heavy smoke screen, US forces attacked the bridge with Apache gunships, Bradley armored vehicles, and assault boats. Well-camouflaged Iraqi positions repel the Apaches, but although Iraqi artillery hits US tanks and Bradleys, it cannot penetrate their armor. The armored vehicles then clear the Iraqis at close range. Iraqi engineers blow up part of the bridge, but it's still passable. US forces now dig in for an expected Iraqi counterattack on the East Bank. In the evening, Iraqis tried to drive 3 explosive-laden trucks onto the bridge despite Hamdani's opposition. US forces destroy it from range, killing up to 300 Iraqis for just 1 US fatality, which is from friendly fire. As US forces close on Baghdad, the British probe into Basra. Their tactics are more conservative than the Americans, partly due to higher British sensitivity to casualties because of lower public support for the war, and Basra's majority Shia population, which historically have opposed Saddam. British forces create a loose cordon around Basra and focus on gaining information on Iraqi morale and dispositions. Initially, US forces planned a similar approach for attacking Baghdad. They planned 5 forward operating bases around Baghdad to conduct raids into the city to locate Iraqi units and capture Baghdad in phases. By April 6th, US forces have secured the 3 most important bases: Objective Saints, Objective Lions, Baghdad's airport, and Objective Titans. Meanwhile, the Marine Expeditionary Force advances from the southeast towards Baghdad. After rapid success at Karbala, some US commanders, like 3rd Infantry Division's General Buford Blunt, want to use more aggressive methods. His forces secure Baghdad airport and request so-called thunder runs into the city. These are heavy armored urban raids to determine enemy strength, kill Iraqi troops, and demoralize defenders. 3rd Infantry Division already used this method in Najaf, but other commanders are concerned about poor intelligence on Baghdad's defense and logistical issues. Although Iraqi commanders plan a defense on paper, there are no coordinated plans. Saddam spends much of his day moving between safe houses in pro-government districts. He has little time for much else, as Saddam's presidential secretary tells a group of officers. "My brothers, the president is tired of the way things are. Do not mention any problems. Concentrate on the positive." US 5th Corps Commander William Wallace allows Blunt to mount a thunder run under the guise of securing supply lines between objectives Saints and Lions. 2nd Brigade Combat Team Commander Colonel David Perkins assigns Task Force 164th Armor to the job, with 28 Abrams and 14 Bradley armored vehicles. The column immediately takes small arms fire, with intensity increasing as US units advance. US armor destroys Iraqi trucks, but the Thunder Run coincides with the morning commute, and civilians are caught in the crossfire. Tank Platoon Sergeant Eric Olsen later recalls, "As I drove by the destroyed enemy truck, I saw the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my life. Behind the enemy truck was a blown-up civilian car that had a family in it. The father was twitching on the ground with no skin on his body. Pretty sure he was dead. The mother was sitting on the ground, rocking back and forth. Her body was smoking, and in her arms, she cradled an infant. The other casualty, I believe, was a boy about 10 years old. He had no hair and very little skin left." The US tanks plow through the barricades into the safety of the airport, having lost 1 killed in action and 1 Abrams knocked out. They claim to kill 2,000 Iraqi troops. The Iraqi government uses footage of the destroyed Abrams to suggest they defeated the Thunder Run, but the tank was actually destroyed by US air power to prevent its capture.
We crushed the forces in Saddam International Airport, and we cleaned the whole place of the airport by our Republican Guard. Now the Republican Guard is in full control of Saddam International Airport, and those mercenaries now outside the airport in Abu Ghraib district, and they are surrounded, and we are pounding them by missiles and heavy artillery.
Frustrated, Perkins requests another Thunder Run, this time into the city center. Possible, US forces would remain overnight, with infantry forces securing highway overpasses behind them, called Mo, Larry, and Curly. Wallace is skeptical and only orders a similar raid to the first one. Perkins claims he never receives this order and instead turns his forces into central Baghdad on April 7th. Wallace recalls the moment. "I'm watching the Blue Force tracker and I see this column taking a right at Mo and heading downtown. And at that point, from my perspective, we were committed to doing what Perkins was doing. So there was no choice other than to reinforce the success he was having." Perkins' armor makes it to Baghdad's presidential district, where large roads and parks provide advantageous fields of fire. He decides to stay, but requires ammunition resupply from unarmored trucks. Meanwhile, Iraqi units pressure US infantry, protecting the overpasses with heavy swarm-style attacks. Iraqi forces, including many recently arrived foreign jihadists, almost overrun the Americans at Curly. US ammunition runs low, while their resupply convoy also suffers losses and several trucks explode. It finally makes it through to Perkins' armored units in the center, and reinforcements secure Curly.
We were taking fire, we dismounted, we got online and started receiving mortar fire. We started bounding back, we received one more, heard a loud boom, and all of a sudden my ankle, leg, and arm started hurting. Again, it's throbbing a little bit. It's not as bad as you would think. Sting a little bit of throb. Yeah, I'll be good.
With US forces outside presidential palaces in Baghdad, it's clear the Iraqi government has fled. To further highlight the Ba'athist regime's fall, US forces toppled the Saddam statue on Firdos Square, watched by the world's media. Many report the incident as the definitive US victory moment, drawing analogies to historical liberations. This joyous moment recalls the deposition of scores of statues of Lenin all over Eastern Europe at the end of the Cold War. In reality, there are fewer people there than portrayed, with Iraqi political exiles and US psychological operations personnel helping to orchestrate the event. By now, organized Iraqi resistance is mostly over, as British forces secure Basra and US forces move on to Saddam's hometown of Tikrit on April 14th. Operation Iraqi Freedom is usually seen to end on May 1st, 2003, when President Bush gives a speech on an aircraft carrier under a Mission Accomplished banner. Although the banner only refers to the aircraft carrier's mission, it's taken as referring to the whole war. Even if Bush's own words stress coalition troops will remain for the time being.
Transition from dictatorship to democracy will take time, but it is worth every effort. Our coalition will stay until our work is done, and then we will leave, and we will leave behind a free Iraq.
By May 2003, 139 US and 33 British troops have been killed. Iraqi losses are hard to measure, but estimates vary between 11 and 45,000, with around 7,400 civilians killed. Coalition forces find no WMDs or terrorist training camps that they'd previously claimed existed in Iraq. But the public victory narrative overshadows this failure, and Bush's approval reaches 71%. Iraq, though, is not at peace. The coalition's post-conflict strategy is muddled, and looting is common in major cities. US and British military forces do little to prevent it, with Donald Rumsfeld even suggesting such crimes are an expression of liberation. Think what's happened in our cities when we've had riots and problems and looting. Stuff happens. Freedom's untidy, and free people are free to make mistakes and commit crimes and do bad things. They're also free to live their lives and do wonderful things, and that's what's going to happen here. For Iraqi civilians, the looting shows coalition forces are unable or unwilling to protect their property or maintain the rule of law. Store owner Mohammed Abbas Abdul Al-Hur returns home to chaos. When I got back into Baghdad, it was not the city I'd left just a week before. It was like some other place, and it was a depressing sight. You saw people walking everywhere carrying looted goods, all kinds of things. When I got into my neighborhood, I found the streets littered with weapons and Iraqi uniforms. All these soldiers had just vanished and left their things. Nowhere could you see any sign of law and order. Everything had collapsed. There are not enough coalition troops to secure Iraqi military depots, and thousands of weapons disappear, and the US has no coherent occupation policy. Rumsfeld wants to withdraw troops and hand over security to an international peacekeeping coalition in mid-2003. But US administrators discover the Iraqi exiles they've been working with do not have the popular support they claim. Meanwhile, Kurdish forces in the north advance beyond agreed lines, adding to tensions. Saddam remains on the run, and although some Iraqis initially welcome coalition troops, the stress of defeat and collapse of administration leads to public demoralization and skepticism regarding coalition intentions. Former Iraqi army officer Mohammed Khalil Hamed comments on returning home. The only signs of life to be seen were the warplanes in the skies and the US soldiers roaming the streets. I felt so helpless when I looked at them, these occupiers. The Kuwaitis looked at us the same way when we invaded there, and they had the right. Now, I knew how they felt. Bush appoints neoconservative Louis Paul Bremer as overseer of the new Coalition Provisional Authority on May 12, 2003. Bremer must develop a post-invasion policy, but faces contradictory pressures. Kurds, Iraqi exiles, and other neocons want to disband the entire Ba'athist state, including the army and police. Some US and Iraqi military figures want to preserve the core of the administrative state and the police and military to anchor post-invasion security. Meanwhile, low coalition troop numbers mean that some Iraqi cities, especially Sunni-majority cities further north, are outside coalition control. These cities, which are generally more pro-Saddam, see little fighting in the invasion and become hubs for foreign fighters who continue to enter the country across unprotected borders. One of these cities would soon show the Iraq War is still far from over: Fallujah. The new media policies of the Iraq War were informed by the American experience of the Vietnam War, where tactical successes of insurgents had a big impact on the American home front. Among the most famous Vietnamese attacks was the raid on the American embassy in Saigon during the Tet festivities in 1968. If you want to learn more about this attack, check out our new series, History's Most Daring Raids. And where can you watch History's Most Daring Raids? On Nebula, a streaming service we're building with other creators where you don't need to sift through a deluge of AI slop. Nebula is made and curated by humans, and it's available in 4K resolution on your browser, on your smartphone, smart TV, or streaming box like Apple TV or Roku. And that's not all. On Nebula, you can also watch all our regular videos ad-free and earlier than on YouTube. If you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory, you can sign up for just $30 for an entire year. Right now, you can also get the Nebula Lifetime membership. Pay once and get access to everything Nebula has to offer for as long as you and Nebula exist. If you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory, you can save $200 on the regular price. The Lifetime membership allows us to invest in more original content and improve the platform for everyone. 1/3 of your Lifetime membership will also support us at Realtime History directly. Footage research for this video was done by Chris Stewart of the Archive Project. The Archive Project is a video research platform that provides searchable access to over 135,000 transcribed film clips from the US National Archives. It's built for historians, documentary filmmakers, and anyone interested in primary source material. You can find them at thearchiveproject.com. If you want to learn more about the Gulf War in 1991 and why the US decided to invade Iraq in 2003, check out our previous videos. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the description below. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Realtime History, the only history channel that remembers the old saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again.